All right, Southern politics. This is Arkansas, the natural state. Arkansas is the 25th state in the Union. I don't know about you, but when I think of Arkansas, I think of two things. I think of Bill Clinton and Walmart. Just a nice little start. Okay, what are we going to talk about? Let's talk about demographics. Let's talk about the background and political history. Let's discuss state level and U.S. House, Senate, national level politics. And then we'll look at the any current events politically related to the state of Arkansas. All right, let's start off with demographics. The first thing I want to point out is this little chart right over here. It's from US News, and it has Arkansas ranked number 45 of 50 overall based on these categories. Thought this was interesting and just a nice little snapshot of basically how poorly Arkansas performs, but don't worry, Mississippi is below it at number 48. Okay, moving over here to the column of information. Arkansas has about 3 million people, which means just like Mississippi, Arkansas has 6 electoral college votes. Okay, population is rising, 79% white, about 16% black, just under 8% Hispanic. And I'll give you a second to look at anything else that might stick out at you. And you can always come back and check this out too. All right, moving on. All right, history and background. So in the early 19th century, Louisiana Purchase, we hit up Napoleon to buy some land from France. And in that purchase was what became Arkansas Territory, and then what would a couple of decades later become our 25th state, which is Arkansas. Politics back in those days, even as a territory, it allowed them to get involved in the democratic process, not as much as when they became a state, but needless to say, early in the running, it was a lot of duels. Okay, it was democratic in nature, but American politics were nothing like they are today. At the end of Reconstruction, Arkansas was part of the so-called Solid South, where the Democratic Party dominated for a very, very long time, and we're going to talk a lot about that. Since the 60s, the Republicans have become increasingly competitive in the statewide and U.S. congressional elections, but again, we'll talk about the differences with that. In fact, the Democrats, or what we considered the Democrats today, have painted themselves into a corner, much like the Republicans, to where what you would consider to be a Democrat today based on policy stances, social issues, would look a lot like what the Republican Party of the North of President Lincoln looked like back in early America. And early in the 20th century, no one knows exactly when, but there was a monumental shift in the way the Republican and Democrat parties aligned themselves. What you see today, Republicans tend to favor less government. They don't like big government. And the Democrats tend to favor the big government and social progressive issues that used to be flip-flopped. Anyway, just a little fact there. When you see things like, Democrats have been in control this long, well, back in the day, if, we would have called them Republicans based off of today's stuff. Okay, Arkansas state level politics. Here's your governor. Governor Hutchinson is in his second term. He will be term limited in 2022. We have right here in the middle, we have the makeup as of 2012 of state lawmakers, the State House and the Arkansas Senate. Republicans have a supermajority there. Biggest difference with that over here, what I'm calling a fun fact, is a supermajority is a lot more than a simple majority, where it's 50% or half of the body plus one. So with 100 members in the state house, well, your simple majority obviously would be 51. But a supermajority means you have two-thirds majority, which would, is interesting because it makes things, filibuster proof at the U.S. level, veto proof, things like that. So Arkansas has three main branches, just like the federal government: executive, legislative, and judicial. And as I mentioned before, the Democratic Party had held a majority from 1876 all the way up to 2012, once we saw this monumental shift in GOP takeover. I thought this was interesting to look at the current Senate districting and House of Representatives, the Arkansas House districting and party affiliation. It's interesting to look at both of these. You have the Senate here, House of Representatives over here, and then over here, these are the 4 U.S. congressional districts, and it's just really interesting to me to look how all the blue areas are split. When you come over here, and it's almost as if to ensure that that the Republicans can maintain control. It's very interesting. But there are 3 main areas of Democratic strongholds. You have Fayetteville up here, is where the University of Arkansas is. You have the Delta, which is a very poor area from Reconstruction days and post-slavery poverty. And then right here in the middle is, of course, the biggest city in Arkansas, the greatest population area of Little Rock. Okay, here you have all Republicans. You have 4 U.S. congressmen representing the 4 congressional districts, and you have 2 Republican U.S. senators in Tom Cotton and John Boozman. Okay. 2016. Let's talk about what happened. Did playing on Hillary's home court make a difference? No, it clearly did not. In fact, Secretary Clinton performed very, very poorly in her home state, receiving the lowest number of votes since 1972 when Nixon won. And Donald Trump won very big. In fact, the only person to outperform him as a Republican was Nixon in 1972. And another interesting note is, since 1960, no non-Southern Democratic presidential nominee has won Arkansas. Obviously, that didn't, Bill Clinton does not count. So what about beyond 2016? How's that looking for the state of politics in the state of Arkansas? Well, many demographic trends, everything seems to point towards the Republican stronghold holding for a long time, and there's a few reasons why. First, Arkansas is likely to maintain dominance by white evangelicals and white non-urban interests. So Arkansas, by and large, remains a state. In fact, 39% of Arkansas's population consists of white evangelicals. And the third highest percentage, only Tennessee and West Virginia have a greater percentage of white evangelicals. And these folks go to church. As a matter of fact, the state of Arkansas is in the top 5 in weekly reported church attendance. So there you have it. Okay, second reason that the Republicans are likely to maintain a stronghold in Arkansas politics is because all the population growth that's happening in the state is happening in the right areas for Arkansas. Primarily in 2 areas: Northwest Arkansas, which is like Ozark country, Republican stronghold, with the exception of greater Fayetteville area where the university is. The other area are the surrounding counties around Little Rock, so the suburbs. Very, very Republican. And if you were to go back and watch the slide again with the districting, you would see that a lot of that is split. Okay, and the third reason is the Latino vote will likely remain low, staying below 5%. And that's unlike other states in the South and in the Southwest, where we do see the Hispanic population rising. Now, with that being said, there is a glimmer of hope for the Democratic Party in Arkansas. The first reason is because the Arkansas is considered a populous state with a weak Tea Party presence, and the second reason is promising for Democrats because they're seeing some voting by the state legislature that's out of typical GOP norms. 2 examples I have here. Arkansas voted to raise the minimum wage. It's now $9.25. And Arkansas recently became the second state in the South to vote yes on medical marijuana. Florida was the first. All right. So what's going on in Arkansas, politically speaking? Well, a couple of weeks, just like us, everybody's going to go to the ballot, but Arkansas's got some important issues besides the presidential and congressional elections. They have some 2 issues that are going to be on the ballot for them. I wrote here issue 1, 2, and 3. Issue 1 is really not that important to us. It's a transportation tax that's going to go toward their infrastructure. But I really want to kind of focus on issue 2 and issue 3. Issue 2, excuse me, it addresses term limits for state lawmakers. As it stands today, any member of the Senate or the House, or a combination of both, if they serve in both, can serve a combined total service of 16 years. This amendment to the Constitution, this issue 2, if it passes, what it will do is it will remove that 16-year total service, and it will change it to 12 consecutive years. Then he or she can take a 4-year break, and then the clock resets, and they could serve another 12 consecutive years. I thought this was interesting because Arkansas is the state back in the 90s that voted yes to impose term limits on the United States Congress. More specifically, their elected officials. So anyone who went to serve in the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate elected in Arkansas, they voted yes to impose term limits on them. So, and that's my fun fact. That case actually went to the U.S. Supreme Court and was shot down. And that is U.S. term limits versus Thornton. When you have some extra time, you should read up on that because that's a very interesting Supreme Court case to look at. But long story short, it Article 1 of the Constitution disagrees with what the state of Arkansas did. So issue number 3. Okay, and this is an interesting one. Issue number 3 revolves around how to get an issue on the ballot. And I know that's kind of confusing, so let me explain. So this would be an amendment to the Constitution of the state of Arkansas that would make it more difficult for the average person to get an issue on the ballot come election time. And the people of Arkansas are not happy about it because these standards would shut the ordinary people out of the process. The people who stand outside the state capitol gathering signatures from people, those people would effectively be shut out of the process. And there's 3 reasons why. First reason is they're making it more difficult by moving the deadline up. So in any election year, like this year in 2020, the current deadline is July. You have to have all your signatures by July. Well, now they would move it up to January. So now you have 6 less months to get all the signatures you need. Second, the people who are out getting these canvassers that are out getting these signatures, instead of only having to get signatures from 15 counties in Arkansas, it would now be changed to 45 counties, which again makes it a lot more difficult to get something on the ballot. And the third way they're trying to make it more difficult is they would eliminate what they call the cure period. So that's the period between the deadline and the election where they're going through and making sure everything's valid and making sure that all the signatures are correct. So there would be no more cure period that would allow for any types of revisions to the signatures or additional signatures. So I don't know about you, but if I were living in Arkansas based off of just that information, I would be tempted to vote no on issue 3 at least. Okay. Questions about the state of Arkansas, you can email me here at my USM email account, or you can just reply here on the thread. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate your time.